It was a dusky evening, the kind where the last vestiges of the sun cast long, dramatic shadows across the winding road. This particular road cut through the dense, wooded outskirts of the city, a quiet path Michael Hayes usually found peaceful. At 38, Michael was a tech CEO, renowned for his sharp brilliance and, perhaps, an equally noted emotional distance. He was on his way home from daycare, his black SUV gliding through the twilight. In the back seat, his 5-year-old daughter, Emma, hummed a soft tune from her ballet class, her pink tutu still shimmering faintly in the dim light. They were barely 10 minutes from their exclusive gated neighborhood when Michael's instincts suddenly took over, slamming his foot on the brakes. Up ahead, just off the shoulder of the road, a violent flicker of flames danced amidst the trees. Thick black smoke coiled upwards, obliterating the last slivers of the fading sunlight. He slowed, squinting, trying to make sense of the chaotic scene through his windshield. A car, a silver sedan, lay crumpled in the ditch, its front end utterly destroyed, and it was ablaze. "Daddy, what's that?" Emma's small voice was laced with curious innocence from the back. Michael abruptly pulled over, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Stay in the car, Emma," he commanded, his voice firm. He reached back and locked the doors. "Do not move." The instant he stepped out, an oppressive wave of heat slammed into him. The fire was growing, ravenously licking up the hood of the car, its hungry tendrils already creeping towards the shattered windshield. The air was thick with the acrid stench of gasoline and burning metal, underscored by something darker, something terrifyingly unidentifiable. Then, through the roar of the flames, he heard it, a faint, frantic cry. "Help! Help me!" It emanated from the wreckage. Michael's pulse surged, adrenaline coursing through him as he sprinted towards the driver's side. The door, however, was hopelessly crushed inward from the impact. He ducked, peering through the remaining shards of glass, and what he saw inside froze him to the spot. Slumped against the seat, a woman lay motionless. Her long brown hair was a tangled mess, parts of it visibly singed. Her face was smeared with blood, and her eyes were closed. She was dressed in a white wedding gown, now torn and dirt-streaked, its delicate fabric scorched at the hem. But it wasn't the grim tableau of the crash that truly horrified Michael. It was the realization that she was chained. Literally chained to the steering wheel. A thick, rusted iron chain was looped cruelly around her torso and fastened securely to the wheel itself with an equally rusted lock. Her wrists were bound, her body barely upright, a grotesque, horrifying spectacle as if intentionally arranged for a witness. "Jesus Christ," Michael whispered, the words barely escaping his lips. "Help, please." The voice returned, a mere whisper now, almost consumed by the fire. She was still conscious, still alive, but barely. Without a second thought, Michael seized a sturdy fallen branch. He swung it with desperate force, shattering the last fragments of the driver's window. Glass flew as he reached into the inferno, his fingers scrambling, searching for the lock, desperate to undo the cruel restraints. The heat was becoming unbearable. Flames had begun to crawl insidiously through the dashboard, now mere inches from the woman's scorched gown. "Hey! Hey! Stay with me!" Michael yelled, his voice hoarse from the smoke, a cough tearing through his throat. "I'm going to get you out. All right? Just hang on." Her eyelids fluttered, a flicker of life. For one terrible, agonizing second, her eyes met his, and Michael would forever be haunted by the raw, unspeakable terror and pain he saw there. They were wide, a vivid green, reflecting a horror beyond words. "Please. They'll kill me, they'll come for me," she choked out, her voice barely a thread. "Do not let them take me back." And then, with a final, desperate gasp, She collapsed. Her head fell forward, completely unconscious. "No!" Michael shouted, his voice raw. "Stay awake! Come on!" He fumbled for his back pocket, yanked out his pocket knife, and desperately began sawing at the strap binding her wrist. The heavy metal chain, however, was too formidable. He shifted, sweat streaming down his face, the intense heat of the flames kissing his arms as he leaned further into the inferno. Behind him, he could faintly hear Emma screaming from the SUV, a desperate, childish sound, swallowed by the louder roar of the fire. With a primal grunt, Michael braced himself and pulled with every ounce of his dwindling strength. Something gave. The chain around her chest snapped, just barely at its weld. He reached in, hooking his hands under her arms, and yanked with every ounce of desperation he had left. Her body came free just as the dashboard erupted in a violent blast of flame. Michael stumbled backward, dragging her, onto the wet grass, instinctively shielding her body with his own as a deafening boom cracked through the night. The car exploded in a blinding fireball, sending a searing wave of heat and debris into the sky. Shocked, winded, and coated in ash, Michael lay there for a moment, his heart hammering against the unmoving body of the woman beneath him. Emma was screaming his name from the SUV, her cries frantic. Sirens began to howl in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Someone must have called it in. Michael looked down at the woman cradled in his arms. Her face was deathly pale, her lips trembling with the faint remnants of her breath. He whispered, "You're okay now. I got you out. You're safe." But even as he spoke the words, a chilling certainty settled over him. Whatever hell she had just been pulled from, this was only the beginning. The hospital was a disorienting blur of stark fluorescent lights, rushing nurses, and the pervasive, metallic scent of antiseptic. Michael paced restlessly outside the emergency room doors, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, soot still smeared across his hands and shirt. The woman had remained unconscious since he'd pulled her from the wreckage, and bewilderingly, no one knew who she was. No ID, no phone, no purse. Nothing but a charred wedding dress and those chilling chains. 2 officers stood nearby, speaking in hushed tones, with the attending nurse. One of them, a stern-looking detective named Graves, approached Michael. "You were the one who found her?" Graves asked, his gaze sharp and assessing. Michael nodded. "Yes, she was chained inside a burning car. I had to break her out." He met the detective's stare. "And you have no idea who she is?" Graves pressed. "No," Michael replied, his jaw tight. "I've never seen her before in my life." Graves eyed him carefully. "No signs of a license plate on the vehicle. Burned clean off. You said she told you someone was going to kill her?" Michael nodded again. "She said, 'They'll come for me. Don't let them take me back.' And then she passed out." Graves exchanged a quick, knowing glance with his partner. "Might be trafficking. Possibly a forced marriage. We've seen some rings operating in this state. But without any ID or statements, she's just a Jane Doe. We'll need to wait until she wakes up." Hours crawled by. By midnight, the emergency room was overflowing, now packed with patients from a nearby pile-up. The hospital administrator pulled Michael aside, her expression weary. "She's stable," she began, "but we don't have the resources for long-term observation. And since you were the one who brought her in—" Michael raised a brow, a flicker of disbelief crossing his face. "Are you suggesting I take her with—" "Me? We have no family, no ID, and she's not under arrest." The administrator nodded, a plea in her eyes. "If you're willing to supervise her recovery short-term, Mr. Hayes, it would help us immensely. This is highly unusual, but—" Michael hesitated. his gaze drifting towards the window into the emergency room bay. The woman lay still in the hospital bed, an IV drip in her arm, an oxygen tube gently tucked under her nose. Burned lace still clung to her collarbone, a stark contrast to the sterile white sheets. Her face, though bruised and utterly exhausted, somehow stirred something within him, a flicker of responsibility, perhaps even something deeper. "I'll take her," he heard himself say. The very next morning, Michael drove her to his home, a sprawling, modern sanctuary perched on the cliffs of Pacific Heights. The sleek, glass-walled house overlooked the vast, shimmering expanse of the ocean, a design that was contemporary yet undeniably warm. It was never meant to feel lonely, but since his wife had passed away 4 years prior, it had grown quieter, its expansive rooms only truly filled by Emma's vibrant laughter. Emma watched from the grand staircase as Michael carefully carried the unconscious woman into the guest room. Her wide, curious eyes took in the stranger's tattered gown, the wrapped wounds peeking from beneath the blanket, and the profound stillness of this unexpected guest in their home. "Is she a princess?" Emma asked softly, her voice barely a whisper. Michael paused, looking at his daughter. "Why do you say that?" Emma pointed a small finger. "Because she's wearing a sparkly dress, but it's all burned like she escaped a dragon." Michael offered a faint smile, a rare softening of his features. "Maybe she did." "I'm going to call her Princess Fire," Emma declared, her eyes bright with innocent certainty. "Because she survived the flames." Later that night, Michael stood at the doorway to the guest room, watching her sleep. She stirred restlessly, her brows furrowed in distress. Then she began to mutter, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "No, please, not again." Her hands twitched, clawing at the blanket as if trying to escape an unseen grasp. Michael stepped forward, unsure if he should wake her. Then her voice rose, cracked and raw with terror. "I don't want to go back to that house. Don't make me go back." The morning light filtered softly through the guest room curtains, casting warm, golden patterns onto the pristine white sheets where she lay. Her eyelids fluttered before opening slowly, her breath shaky as reality began to seep back, not all at once, but in fragmented pieces. She didn't know where she was. She didn't even know who she was. The ceiling above was unfamiliar. The air smelled distinctly of lavender and sea salt. Her arms ached, and her wrists bore faint, angry bruises. Panic, cold and sharp, began to rise in her chest. But then the door creaked open, and a man entered. He wasn't threatening. His eyes, though tired, held a deep kindness. He moved carefully, slowly, carrying a tray laden with soup and tea. "Hey," he said gently, his voice soft, as he set the tray down on the bedside table. "You're safe. This is my home. You were in a car crash. I found you." She tried to sit up, her body protesting with a dull ache, but he helped her, his hands quiet and steady. "Who am I?" she whispered, her voice a raspy whisper. He shook his head slowly. "You haven't remembered yet. That's okay. Don't force it." She looked at him, searching his face for answers. "And you?" she asked. "Michael," he replied. "Michael Hayes. My daughter and I have been looking after you since that night." As if summoned by his words, the door swung wider, and in bounded a little girl with a cascade of curly hair and a well-loved stuffed bunny clutched in her arms. "That's her!" the girl exclaimed, her eyes wide with excitement. "That's the princess I told you about." Michael chuckled, a gentle sound. "Emma, remember what we talked about? Soft voices, gentle steps." Emma crept closer, her wide eyes fixed on the woman. "Can I tell you your name?" The woman blinked, unsure, a fragile uncertainty in her gaze. Emma, however, beamed, radiating pure joy. "Princess Fire." Michael raised an eyebrow, a slight warning in his tone. "Emma." But Emma, with all the profound wisdom a 5-year-old could muster, explained, "Because you came from the fire and didn't disappear." To their surprise, the woman laughed. It was just a small sound, cracked and uncertain, but it was real. The first sign of something stirring within her, beyond just fear. The days that followed passed quietly, a gentle rhythm settling into the Hayes household. She still hadn't remembered her real name, but gradually, other things began to surface. How to make tea, the comforting melody of lullabies, the soft embrace of familiar blankets. She meticulously avoided mirrors, flinched at loud noises, and woke often from nightmares she couldn't articulate. Yet, slowly, she was healing. Michael remained nearby but never hovered. He allowed her to find her own rhythm within the house, ensuring she always felt a quiet sense of belonging. Emma, on the other hand, had no such reservations. She had taken to Princess Fire with complete, unyielding devotion. They painted together, built towering pillow forts, and Emma would confidently lead her by the hand through the garden, whispering secrets as if they had known each other forever. One afternoon, while Michael worked in his study, the three of them ventured out to the local grocery store. It was Sophia's first trip outside since the accident, though she still didn't know that was her name. The store was a symphony of brightness and noise. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, carts rolled past in constant motion, and music played softly from unseen speakers. She clung tightly to the handle of their shopping cart, her eyes darting nervously. Emma, ever curious, wandered a little ahead, drawn by a colorful display of stuffed animals. For a moment, the woman allowed herself to be distracted, picking out a box of cereal. Then, she looked up. Emma was gone. "Emma!" she called, her voice tightening with immediate panic. She dropped everything, the cereal box clattering to the floor, and ran. The overhead lights seemed to blur into streaks of white. The aisles stretched endlessly, every shopper a dizzying blur of motion. Her breath grew shallow, ragged. She called again, louder now, her voice raw. "Emma!" She rounded a corner and saw a man in a gray hoodie bending over a child. For a terrifying moment, something primal snapped inside her. She sprinted forward, a guttural scream tearing from her throat. "Get away from her!" The man looked up, startled. Just a store employee handing out a sample. But she didn't see that. Her mind was a whirlwind of terrifying flashes, hands dragging her, muffled screams behind locked doors, voices speaking a language she didn't understand. She collapsed to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably, her body shaking. Emma, hearing the distress, ran over, wrapping her small arms tightly around her. "I'm here. I'm here," she whispered, a comforting anchor. Michael arrived seconds later, his eyes wide with a fleeting moment of panic. He dropped to the floor beside them, holding them both tightly. "Shh. It's okay," he murmured, gently brushing her hair from her tear-streaked face. "She's here. We're safe." The woman looked up at him, her face a mask of profound sorrow, streaked with tears. "I thought I lost her. I thought—" Michael didn't say anything right away, but as he looked at her, truly looked, he understood. Whoever she was before, whatever she'd endured, it wasn't just about memory loss. She had known real loss, deep, soul-crushing loss. And now she was terrified, utterly terrified of ever feeling that unbearable pain again. That night, as he tucked Emma into bed, his daughter whispered, "Is she okay?" Michael kissed her forehead. Forehead. "She's trying to be, and you're helping more than you know." In the hallway, he found the woman sitting alone by the vast window, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. He sat beside her, the quiet expanse of the ocean stretching before them. "Whatever you've been through," he began, his voice low and steady, "you don't have to go through the rest alone." She looked at him then, her eyes still clouded with a lingering sadness, but a glimmer of something else, too. Her voice was barely audible, a fragile whisper. "Thank you for finding me, even when I didn't know I was lost." Outside, the first stars began to emerge, soft and steady, just like hope. Rain pattered softly against the tall windows of the Pacific Heights estate as Michael sat in his study, poring over a file the private investigator had just delivered. A glass of untouched scotch sat on the edge of his desk, condensation dripping onto a leather-bound journal. He turned the page, the shocking weight of what he was reading pressing hard against his chest. The dress. That charred wedding gown Sophia had been chained in. It had been custom-made in Eastern Europe, ordered through a luxury boutique known for its discreet, high-profile clientele. The buyer's name was a fake, but the shipping records led to a warehouse in Nevada already under quiet federal investigation for suspected human trafficking activity. The VIN number from the wrecked car, once painstakingly decoded, linked to another ghost, an unregistered vehicle paid for entirely in cryptocurrency. Everything was pointing to one terrifying, undeniable conclusion. The woman he had brought into his home was not just a victim of random violence. She had been targeted, groomed, and sold. Michael closed the file, the sound a sharp snap in the quiet room, and leaned back in his chair, his jaw clenched tight. The investigator's final note echoed chillingly in his mind. "There's a ring. International. They sell women. Brides. For the ultra-rich. You're Jane Doe? She's one of them. And she ran." He stared at the closed door to the guest room. Sophia, though she didn't yet remember her name, had begun to show undeniable signs of healing. Emma had grown attached to her with an almost fierce devotion, and she, in turn, had warmed visibly to Emma's innocent affection. There was laughter now at the dinner table, a cautious, fragile peace that felt remarkably like family. But this devastating truth, threatened all of it. So Michael made a choice. He would not tell her. Not yet. Not until she remembered on her own. Not until he could figure out how to protect her from what remembering might ultimately cost. 3 days later, the sky turned a somber gray with the early evening storm. Thunder rolled ominously over the Pacific Ocean. Sophia stood by the wide kitchen window, her eyes distant, her hands wrapped tightly around a cup of tea. Her hair had grown softer now, the last of her visible bruises fading into her skin. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, Emma's idea declared with utmost certainty. "Princesses wear comfy clothes, too." Michael stepped beside her, his presence a quiet anchor. "You okay?" he asked softly. She didn't look at him, her gaze fixed on the stormy horizon. "The rain," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the patter. "It reminds me of something, a place." He waited, giving her space. She continued, her voice dropping even lower. "There was a house, not here, somewhere else, big, with guards, a locked room." Her hand tightened reflexively on the mug. "I remember screaming. No one came. Until one day, someone new showed up. He said his name was Darius. Michael stiffened, his body tensing imperceptibly. Her voice dropped further, a chilling whisper. He wore a suit, spoke gently, told me I was special, that I'd make a perfect bride. And then they dressed me. The dress? I didn't choose it. They said it would be my last gift before I became someone's possession. She turned to face him, her eyes wide, filled with a primal dread. I didn't know whose. I just knew I had to run. I don't even know how I got out. Michael exhaled slowly, the truth settling heavily around them. Do you remember your name? She hesitated for a long moment, then closed her eyes. Sophia. My name is Sophia. He reached out and touched her shoulder gently, a silent gesture of acceptance and understanding. Thank you for telling me. That night, as the wind howled outside and the rain lashed relentlessly against the house, Michael could not sleep. He moved restlessly through the hallways, checking windows, doors, every single lock. The file from the investigator was hidden deep in his safe, but the grim knowledge in his mind weighed heavily, an oppressive burden. Sometime after midnight, he saw it. A flicker of movement on the security feed. The backyard motion sensor light had come on, illuminating a fleeting shadow that crossed through the rain-drenched garden. Michael grabbed the handgun from the lockbox by the front door and stepped out silently into the deluge. The cold wind instantly soaked his clothes, but he moved with focused intent, his eyes intensely scanning the darkness. He saw the figure near the hedges, tall, broad, hooded, watching. Hey! Michael shouted, his voice cutting through the storm. The figure turned, startled. For a heart-stopping second, their eyes met. Then, the man bolted. Michael gave chase, tearing down the side path across the sodden lawn and through the gate. Mud splashed wildly underfoot. Branches clawed at his jacket. He nearly slipped on the slick grass, but he kept going, driven by a surge of protectiveness. The man reached the edge of the wooded slope behind the house and vanished into the inky darkness. Michael stopped, breath ragged, heart hammering against his ribs. He returned to the house, soaked and seething with a cold fury. When he walked back inside, Sophia was standing in the foyer, barefoot, holding a sleepy Emma tightly in her arms. "What happened?" she asked, her voice shaking, fear stark in her eyes. Michael met her gaze, his own filled with grim determination. "Someone was outside, watching, but they're gone now." Sophia's arms tightened instinctively around Emma, pulling her closer. "They found me." Michael stepped forward, his wet hair clinging to his face. "No, Sophia," he said, his voice firm and resolute. "They don't get to take you again, not this time." The days following the attempted break-in were restless, fraught with a new tension. Every night, Michael meticulously double-checked the alarm system and kept the handgun within reach. But it was Sophia who changed the most. Something within her had hardened, not from fear, but from a profound clarity. Memory had returned, slowly and painfully, and with it came a chilling purpose. They sat in the kitchen one morning, the sun casting golden light over the countertop, where Emma colored diligently with crayons. Michael sipped his coffee, watching Sophia as she stared blankly at the steam rising from her mug. "I remember everything," she said finally, her voice low, almost flat. Michael looked up, setting his cup down carefully, his full attention now on her. "Tell me." "I was working 2 jobs in Romania," she began, her voice gaining a quiet strength. "Barely getting by. Then I saw an ad online for a nanny position in Switzerland. It promised a visa, housing, good pay. I thought it was my way out." She paused, her hands trembling slightly around the mug, but her gaze was steady now. They flew me to Belgium first, said it was just a stop before final paperwork, but the house I stayed in wasn't a hotel. It was a compound. No windows, no phones, the doors locked from the outside. Michael's jaw clenched, a knot tightening in his stomach. They took my passport, trained us like livestock. How to walk, how to smile, how to obey. Then they auctioned us off to rich men across Europe, most of them old, some young, but all of them cruel. I was purchased by a man named Victor Langdon. He's titled some kind of baron, a sadist with a taste for obedience. Michael could hardly speak, the words catching in his throat. And Darius? He runs the whole ring. He's the one who sold me to Victor. Told me I should be grateful that Victor would keep me alive longer than most. When Victor tried to consummate the marriage, I stabbed him with a broken glass and ran. I don't know how I made it to the U.S., but someone must have been waiting. I woke up in that car, chained, left to burn. Michael's chest tightened with a fierce protectiveness. You should be in a safe house, under protection. This is too big, too dangerous. Sophia looked at him, her gaze unwavering. I know, she said quietly, but I can't leave. Not yet. You and Emma, I love Emma, and I care about you more than I thought I ever could again. Her voice gained a steeliness he hadn't heard before. But I won't live free knowing dozens of other girls are still trapped in that hell. I have names. I remember places. If I testify, we could bring it down. All of it. Michael leaned forward, his resolve mirroring hers. Then we do it together. But we do it smart. No more surprises. He contacted the FBI through private channels, providing them with the little intel they had, and they began to meticulously build a case. It would take weeks, perhaps months, to organize a raid with international coordination. Meanwhile, Sophia would lay low, hidden away in his home. But Darius was always one step ahead. It was supposed to be a quiet drive to Emma's ballet class. Michael was behind the wheel, Sophia in the passenger seat, and Emma singing softly in the back with her stuffed rabbit. The sky was clear and bright. It felt almost normal, until the black SUV slammed into them from the side. Metal screamed, glass shattered, and their car spun violently off the road, careening into a ditch. Michael's ears rang, a metallic taste filled his mouth, and blood trickled down his temple. He looked over. Sophia was moving, dazed but awake, her eyes wide with shock. In the back, Emma screamed, a high, piercing sound of pure terror. Then the doors wrenched open. Two men in black masks yanked at the handles, one aiming a gun directly at Michael. He instinctively reached for the glove box, but the gunman struck him hard in the ribs with the butt of his weapon. Michael fell sideways, gasping for air, pain exploding in his side. "Take the girl!" one of them shouted, his voice muffled by the mask. "No!" Sophia lunged into the back seat, wrapping her arms fiercely around Emma, shielding her small body. Michael, with what little strength he had left, kicked out, slamming the door shut on the second attacker's arm. The man howled in pain. Sophia used that fleeting moment to shove Emma through the opposite side door, her voice a raw scream. "Run, baby, run to the trees!" Emma stumbled out and bolted toward the dense woods. One of the attackers gave chase, but Sophia followed, her legs pumping furiously through the grass, pure rage overtaking her fear. She tackled the man to the ground, clawing at his mask, slamming her elbow into his face until he fell unconscious. Behind her, tires screeched. Michael, despite his injuries, had managed to climb back into the driver's seat, and with a roar, he rammed the SUV forward, scattering their attackers. The other man. Breathing hard, Sophia clutched Emma to her chest, her own body a shield. Back at the house, they locked every door, every window, called the FBI, and huddled together on the floor. Michael clutched his side, grimacing with every shallow breath. Sophia, her hands steady despite her wet eyes, cleaned his wound, pressing gauze against his ribs. "I cannot keep running," she said, her voice quiet but resolute. Michael nodded, his gaze meeting hers. "Then we end it." Sophia's eyes blazed with a fire he hadn't seen before. "I'm going to face him. I'm going to stop him. No more hiding. No more waiting." He reached out and touched her cheek, a silent promise. "We do it together." She took his hand, her grip firm. "I know. But if I fail, promise me you'll protect her." Michael's grip tightened, his eyes unwavering. "You're not going to fail." And neither of them looked away. The estate was hidden deep in the rolling hills outside of Monterey, a sprawling, luxurious complex surrounded by high walls and armed guards. From the outside, it looked like any wealthy businessman's retreat. But inside, it was a gilded prison. Sophia stood in front of the heavy oak doors, dressed once again in the white gown Darius had once forced upon her. Her face was calm, a mask of serene resolve, but her heart thundered against her ribs. This time, she was not a victim. Beneath her gown, a wire, a tiny transmitter was sewn into the fabric near her collarbone. Michael and the FBI were listening. She had volunteered for this, her decision, her mission. When the doors opened, Darius was waiting. His smile was as cold and rehearsed as ever, his suit perfectly pressed, as if no time had passed since their last encounter. "Well, well," he purred, his voice smooth and unsettling. "The runaway bride returns. I must say I expected scars, not steel." Sophia said nothing. She let him take her hand. Let him lead her into the main hall where crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead and polished marble glistened beneath her feet. But behind the grandeur, she saw it. The undeniable signs of imprisonment, barred doors, guards posted with silent efficiency outside bedrooms, silent girls with dead eyes peeking from shadowed corridors. "Come," Darius said, guiding her into a private lounge. "We have much to discuss. Your disappearance cost me gray." "I had to think," she replied smoothly, her voice betraying no hint of the fury simmering within. "But I understand now. I know what I am. I'm ready to belong to you." Darius narrowed his eyes as if weighing her sincerity, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "Birds are easy. Trust requires sacrifice, Sophia." She smiled faintly, a chillingly calm expression. "Then test me." It was the signal. Outside, hidden in vans and concealed behind the thick foliage of the trees, the FBI agents moved into position. Michael, dressed in tactical black, gave the go-ahead. In a sudden, coordinated surge, the team burst through the main gates, taking down the front guards with silent, brutal precision. Inside, chaos erupted. Sophia grabbed a heavy fire extinguisher from the wall and smashed the lock on the nearest bedroom door. "Go!" she whispered to the frightened girls cowering inside. "Help is here! Run!" She moved to the next room, and then the next, shouting over the blaring alarms, her voice clear and strong. "You're free! Go!" Gunshots rang out from downstairs. Michael barreled through the hallway, ducking behind massive pillars, as Darius's men opened fire. One of the goons lunged at him with a knife, a desperate snarl on his face. Michael slammed him into the wall, disarming him with a swift, brutal movement, and then used the very weapon to cut down the next attacker, threw zip ties on two chained girls in a dimly lit cellar. "Get outside!" he urged, his voice hoarse. "Follow the lights!" More shots rang out. Screams echoed from upstairs. In the upstairs corridor, Darius grabbed Sophia by the wrist, yanking her backward, his grip like iron. "You think I did not prepare for betrayal?" he hissed, his face contorted with rage. "You are nothing but property." She twisted, breaking free with a fierce surge of adrenaline, and punched him hard across the face. He stumbled back, momentarily stunned. "That was for every girl you locked away," she said, her voice dripping with cold fury. He pulled a gun from his jacket, leveling it at her chest. "Wrong move, darling." She froze, her breath catching in her throat, terror seizing her. Down the hall, Michael turned the corner just as Darius pulled the trigger. He dove without hesitation, his body a blur of motion. The gunshot cracked like thunder, deafening in the enclosed space. Michael hit the ground hard, a searing pain exploding in his side. "No!" Sophia screamed, catching him as he collapsed into her arms. Darius lifted the gun again, but it was too late. FBI agents stormed the hall, tackling him to the ground, wrestling the weapon away as he shouted obscenities, his voice drowned out by the rush of footsteps and shouted orders. Sophia cradled Michael's head, tears streaming down her face, his blood staining the delicate lace of her dress. "Stay with me," she whispered frantically, her voice raw. "Don't close your eyes. Don't you dare die on me." He coughed, wincing, a faint smile gracing his lips. "That dress still looks better on you than last time." She sobbed, pressing her forehead to his, unable to hold back the torrent of emotion. "Why?" she choked out. "Why would you take a bullet for me?" Michael's voice was hoarse, fading, but clear. "Because you're the first thing I've dreamed of in a long time." "Please," she begged, her voice a desperate plea. "You're not allowed to die. You're the first thing I've dared to dream of, too." His eyes fluttered, then closed. "Michael!" she screamed, a guttural sound of anguish. But in the distance, sirens howled, growing louder with each passing second. Medics arrived, a blur of motion. Hands pulled her away gently. Oxygen masks, pressure bandages, shouting voices. He was still breathing, barely, but alive, as Darius was dragged away in cuffs, bloodied and defeated. Sophia stood in the hallway of the place that had once been her prison, trembling, her body shaking from the aftermath. Around her, girls cried, embraced one another, stepping into the light for the very first time. And for Sophia, the nightmare had finally begun to end. But her heart was still chained to one fragile, beautiful question. Would Michael survive? The sterile scent of antiseptic filled Michael's nose before his eyes even opened. His body ached in ways he could not name, a dull throb that encompassed every muscle. Every bone, every breath felt like it traveled through fire. Machines beeped softly around him, a rhythmic reassurance in the quiet room. He was alive, but it felt like waking from a lifetime of sleep. When his eyes finally focused, they landed on her. Sophia. She sat beside his hospital bed, her hand wrapped tightly around his, a lifeline. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale with exhaustion. But she smiled the moment she saw him stir, a breathtaking, radiant smile. "You're awake," she whispered, her voice cracking with raw emotion. Michael blinked, struggling to speak, his throat dry. "You stayed." "Of course I did," she replied, her voice soft but firm. She leaned forward, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead, her touch gentle. "You saved me. You saved all of us." He managed the ghost of a smile, a faint curve of his lips. "Did we get him?" She nodded, tears finally slipping down her cheeks, glistening in the soft light. "Darius is In custody. So are the rest. The FBI moved in across borders. Dozens of girls were rescued. The whole ring is gone. He closed his eyes, a wave of profound relief washing over him, soaking into his very bones. Thank God. Sophia's voice was filled with a quiet triumph. They said it couldn't have happened without you. Or your testimony. Michael turned his head slowly, his gaze finding hers. And you? Sophia's smile was gentle. I'm under protection now. New identity, full immunity, travel clearance. I can start over anywhere. He tried to sit up, wincing as the pain flared. You could stay with me. With us. Sophia reached for something in her bag, her smile turning playful through the lingering tears. I was hoping you'd say that, she murmured. From beneath a folder of hospital paperwork, she pulled out a thin loop made entirely of intricately twisted paper strips. It was white, fragile, and at first Michael didn't understand. Then she slipped it gently over his finger. A paper chain? He asked, confused, his brow furrowing. Her eyes sparkled alight with a profound tenderness. It's a proposal. He blinked, utterly surprised. You're proposing to me? Yes, she smiled wider, her joy radiating. You once broke my chains. Now I'm giving you this one willingly. It's my way of saying, I choose you. Not because I need you to save me, but because I want to walk this life with you. Michael let out a pained laugh, then winced as it aggravated his side. That's not fair. I can't kneel down and top that, right now. You'll get your chance, she whispered, brushing her lips softly against his forehead. But for now, just say yes. Yes, he said softly, his eyes full of something far deeper than gratitude. 1,000 times, yes. 2 weeks later, Michael came home to the echoing sound of giggles filling the house. He stood in the entryway, leaning on a cane, still healing, but his heart had never felt stronger, never felt so full. In the living room, Emma was curled up in Sophia's lap, the two of them wrapped together in a cozy blanket, deeply absorbed in a fairy tale. When they saw him, Emma scrambled up, launching herself toward him with open arms. "Daddy!" she squealed, her voice a joyful explosion. "You're back!" He scooped her up, grimacing a little at the movement, but laughing too. "Hey, firecracker!" Sophia stood, watching them, tears glistening in her eyes. Emma turned to her, her small voice filled with an instinctive warmth. "Mommy, come here." It was the first time she had ever said it. Sophia froze, her hand flying to her heart, overwhelmed by the profound simplicity of the word. Then, a radiant smile bloomed on her face, and she moved towards them. Michael pulled her into the embrace, a hug that felt like coming home. Home had never felt like this before, safe, whole, undeniably real. That evening, as the sun began its descent, painting the ocean beyond their terrace in breathtaking hues of rose and gold, Sophia stood beside Michael, holding his hand. The wind was gentle, the sea calm, and for once, no shadows lurked behind their eyes, no ghosts from a painful past. Michael looked at her, his voice tender, a hint of playfulness. "So, any plans for the honeymoon?" Sophia grinned, a bright, unburdened smile. "Anywhere, as long as it's not in a trunk chained to a steering wheel." He laughed, shaking his head, a deep, resonant sound of pure happiness. "You're incredible." "I'm alive," she replied, her voice filled with quiet wonder. "And I'm loved." They watched the horizon in silence, two souls who had known pain deeper than words, but who now stood together in the soft, warm light of something truly unbreakable. Love, freedom, a second chance. The sky above the California coastline glowed with the soft blush of sunset, painting the ocean in warm hues of coral and gold. Lavender. A gentle breeze whispered through the swaying palms, carrying the mingled scent of salt water and wildflowers. Rows of pristine white chairs lined the golden beach, facing a simple arch adorned with weathered driftwood and pale roses, all set before the endless, shimmering expanse of the sea. Guests murmured in awe as the soft strains of acoustic guitar floated through the air, but none of them held their breath quite like Michael did. He stood at the altar, dressed in a crisp white linen shirt and navy slacks, his feet bare in the warm sand. The wind played softly with his hair, and in his hand he held a ring, a gleaming symbol of something no fire could ever burn away. Emma, beaming with pride and radiating pure joy, walked ahead of the bride, scattering a delicate trail of pink rose petals from a little woven basket. She wore a whimsical flower crown, and her laughter was pure music to every heart gathered there. She turned once, making sure everyone was watching, then flashed a gap-toothed grin at Michael before skipping the final steps to his side. And then, as one, the crowd rose to their feet, a deep, resonant sound of pure happiness. "You're incredible. I'm alive," she replied. Sophia appeared at the top of the short sand path, absolutely radiant beneath the golden glow of the setting sun. She wore a simple, elegant white gown with no embellishment, no sequins, no jewels. Just a soft, flowing fabric that moved with the wind like freedom itself. Her hair was pulled back gently with a single pearl pin, her feet bare, and her eyes were fixed solely on Michael's. Each step she took seemed to erase every lingering shadow of the past. There was no fear in her face, no phantom chains clinging to her spirit, only pure peace, only profound love. When she reached him, Michael reached out, taking both her hands in his grip gentle yet firm. "You're real," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I always was," she said, her smile soft and knowing. "But now I get to live like it." The officiant, a longtime friend of Michael's from his college days, began the short ceremony. His voice was calm, sincere, and filled with a quiet reverence for the remarkable journey that had brought these two souls here. He spoke of survival, of healing, and of a love that chose to stay when running might have been easier. Michael turned to Sophia, his eyes shining. "I promise to never be your savior," he said, his voice ringing with sincerity. "Only your partner, your equal, your forever safe place." Sophia's eyes glistened with tears, but her smile was unwavering. "I promise to never run from love again," she said, her voice clear and strong. "And I promise to choose you every day with all the freedom I fought for." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the guests cheered, rising to their feet as Michael gently cupped Sophia's face and kissed her. A kiss full of gratitude, hope, and every unspoken vow that had been written in fire and miraculously survived. That night, beneath a sky thick with countless stars, the celebration continued with a quiet intimacy. There was laughter, soft music, and dancing under delicate string lights that swayed gently with the ocean breeze. Emma led the first dance, pulling both Michael and Sophia into a joyous, spinning circle on the sand, giggling with pure delight as her parents stumbled to match her enthusiastic rhythm. Later, when the beach had grown still and most guests had departed, the three of them stood together, holding glowing paper lanterns in their hands. Michael lit Emma's first. "Make a wish," he whispered. Emma closed her eyes tight. Her eyes tightly whispered something secret to the wind, then released the lantern. It floated upward, glowing like a tiny ascending moon against the darkening sky. Sophia lit hers next. She held it for a long, poignant moment, her gaze fixed on its fragile glow before releasing it to join Emma's. Then she turned to Michael, taking his hand, her touch warm and firm. "This is the life I chose," she said softly, looking at him and then down at Emma, who now clung contentedly to her side. "I'm no longer chained. I'm no longer someone's possession or a girl trapped in a nightmare. I choose this. I choose love. I choose to live. And I choose this family." Michael didn't answer with words. He simply wrapped his arms around both of them, holding them close as the lanterns rose higher, joining a sky now filled with countless floating lights. Symbols of prayers, hopes, and souls finally set free. The waves whispered gently on the shore, the stars shone bright, and a new chapter had truly begun. As the final lantern disappeared into the vast night sky, a gentle, profound peace settled over the shore. An ending that was, in every beautiful way, a beginning.